Welcome. Thank you for joining me for this edition of Austin Prep Presents, our virtual series where we're covering a wide variety of topics from athletics to college athletics during a pandemic to estate planning. I'm Jennifer Hodgson. I'm the Director of Alumni Relations and Giving here at Austin Prep. And today we are joined by photographer and engineer Evan Guarino from the class of 2006. And we're also here with APS Media co-presidents and current seniors winding down in the last stretch, Ashley Murdoch and Alyssa Cross. So welcome, Evan, Alyssa, and Ashley. Thanks for being here tonight.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm so glad you're here. So whether it's with your iPhone or Android or the Pagani of cameras, most people have access to capturing the perfect moment. In today's program, we're going to learn a little bit more about the art of photography and how we can take better photos using the tools we have. With the help of our hosts, Ashley and Alyssa, Evan's going to take us through gear, composition, lighting, planning, and editing. A quick housekeeping note for the audience. We encourage you to use the Q&A feature to ask any questions throughout the presentation. We're going to do our best to answer the questions as we go along, but if there are any outstanding questions, we will answer them towards the end. And before we get started with the topic at hand, I'm going to invite Alyssa, Ashley, and Evan to give a little bit of background about themselves and about their hobbies in photography and their skills. So let's start with Alyssa and then Ashley, and then we'll turn things over to you, Evan.
Okay.
Yeah, so Austin has a really awesome film program that kind of got Ashley and I interested in photography. It's a really great program. I'm going to film at NYU next year because of it. And yeah, we have awesome teachers and really great equipment that got Ashley and I really involved.
Yeah, and I also think it inspired us to start our own company, which is cool. We just do photography for like senior portraits, or like we enjoy landscaping. Evan will talk about all that stuff later. But yeah, it's a really awesome skill to have. Just if you're like we're the friends that take pictures for our friends, and you can be that too. So yeah, take it away, Evan.
All right. So I will, I'm gonna now share my screen here. I put together a little PowerPoint so we can get going with that. Let's see. All right, so first I want to thank Ashley and Alyssa for hosting, and for thank Jen for inviting me to even be on here talking to you guys about this stuff. I love taking photos. It's been a big hobby of mine. I also want to thank Brianna Robbins. She, I think, recommended me for this webinar because she knows that I'm really into this kind of stuff. So I put together this presentation with the goal to kind of keep it as broad as possible. I want anybody of any skill level or experience with a camera to be able to feel like they learned something from this. So let's move on into it here. So I'll introduce myself first. I'm Evan Guarino. I graduated Austin Prep in 2006. From there, I went to WPI. I studied civil engineering. And so now I'm a civil engineer. I work testing roads and bridges all around the country. It's a pretty technical job. So I don't have a lot of creative outlet through my work, but because I get to travel around the country, I started taking photos. I was at some, really interesting places I would never have been otherwise. And I invested in a pretty good camera. And it wasn't until I was in North Dakota, of all places, that I really started falling in love with it. The sky out there is just so dark. And I used my camera at night, and it was like a whole different world. So from there, it's just kind of taken off. I've entered a few photos into some different contests. I won the Massachusetts Audubon Society photo contest, and also one related to the industry that I work in. So this is my my company survey vehicle out here in Montana. So yeah, those are kind of my resume, so to speak, for photography.
And just
And
interject, sorry. I think Evan's like a great example of how anyone can be a photographer, even if you go to school for engineering. Like you can be a photographer with whatever your career is. So that's awesome.
absolutely, yeah, I never took any classes or anything. Everything that I know, I've pretty much learned from the internet. It's an incredible resource. And just talking to other people who are photographers or trying new things. So
Yeah.
anybody can really excel at this kind of thing, especially
That-
nowadays.
That's definitely what Ashley and I have learned. Like, we just became photographers through experience. It's all just about like using cameras over and over again.
Mhm. Yeah, a lot of it ends up being trial and error. So the more you use it, the better you get. So here's a little roadmap of what I wanted to talk about. I loaded it full of camera related puns because why not? It's just kind of nerdy guy that I am. But we're going to talk about photography in general. We'll touch on some gear stuff, like what kind of camera are you using and does it matter? Then we're going to move on to composition, which is basically how do you put together what you want to take a picture of. We'll go into lighting. That's a huge component of how to take a good photo. We'll touch on some planning and then editing, and I'll talk a little bit about how to be creative. All right, so what do we want to take pictures of? I guess that's the biggest question. And for this presentation, I wanted to focus on just some of the main types of photography that I think are the most common that we would encounter in everyday life. So that would be landscapes, some street photography, and portraits. So I'm going to talk a little bit about each one of those. So landscape photography is typically concentrates on nature or kind of wide, broad scale scenes, stuff that you would see in like National Geographic or something. So this is a pretty good example of a landscape shot from a beach. Beaches and mountains and stuff like that are really common. But you can also get into some related forms of landscape photography, which would be cityscapes. So this is a shot of Atlanta that I took on a work trip. City skylines are, pretty impressive view a lot of times, and they make for good photos. But I would consider that still kind of landscape photography.
And
And
everything
then,
we're going to be seeing here, Evan, this is your work, right?
oh yeah, all
is
the
amazing.
photos in this are just examples of stuff that I've taken. So
Wonderful. Thank you.
yeah, thanks. And another subset of landscape photography would be nightscapes, which is essentially just like a landscape at night, but it really kind of focuses on the night environment, whether that's the Milky Way or the moon or stars, or in this case, the Northern Lights. This is in Iceland. It's probably my favorite thing that I've ever shot before is the Northern Lights. They're just so unique and incredible to see. All right, so another type of photography would be street photography. This is kind of a broad term as well. In my mind, this is something that focuses on everyday life, maybe some of the more seemingly mundane parts of life. Maybe it's like passengers moving through a subway station or like fishermen on a dock. It just kind of captures a moment or a mood. A lot of times it contains, or photography includes people, but it's not a necessity. I would imagine a shot like maybe an abandoned storefront or the aftermath of a parade, or nowadays like maybe a protest. Those would be really compelling street photos. So here's just a few other examples, just kind of capturing like the goal is capturing like a mood and something just kind of everyday. It's like some skateboarders down where I used to live in Cambridge. And the last form that I'm going to talk about is portraits, which I think is probably one of the most popular types of photography, especially nowadays. I guess technically selfies would count as portraits, but I'm not going to talk about how to take a better selfie because I really don't have any experience with that. And I don't think you guys would want any of my advice there. But I think that portrait photography does involve a lot of different challenges compared to landscape photography. Um, you have to have a totally different mindset when you go about with portraits. You have to figure out how to make the model more comfortable and kind of create the moment that you want to capture. But for portrait photography, I think that there's the potential to convey a lot more emotion and mood in a photo. And I would also include um, some event photography kind of lumped into portrait photography, because I think that they kind of go hand in hand in a lot of cases. Wedding albums and engagement shoots are, really heavily comprised of portrait shots. So that's just where my mind goes for portraits. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about gear. And I think the thing I want to emphasize here is that cameras are really just tools. So here I took some screenshots from the website where I buy most of my camera stuff. And once you get really hooked on it, it becomes kind of a very expensive and out of control hobby. But, you can take great photos with whatever you have available to you. So here's an example of, there's an instant film camera from Kodak. I think that this would be a great camera that you could use at parties and stuff and take really good photos. You also have here a DSLR that has interchangeable lenses. This is maybe like the camera that comes to mind when people think like professional. And then moving on, there's also this, you can spend upwards of $10,000 on these luxury cameras. It's basically like the Mercedes-Benz of cameras. And then there's also, the camera that everybody has. It's sitting right in your pocket with the iPhone or Android or whatever phone you have. They all come built in now with not only cameras, but oftentimes different lenses as well. But I think that the big thing to take away here is that this $800 DSLR isn't just gonna take automatically better photos than the point and shoot instant film camera, and the $8,000 Leica isn't gonna automatically take better photos than the Canon DSLR. It's all about how you use it. And it's also about what you have with you. So, usually I bring my camera around with me in a backpack at all times. I went to visit my parents one weekend, and sitting right in the backyard behind their house, there was 3 baby owls in a tree, and I didn't have my camera that day. So I had to use my dad's point and shoot camera, which is like 10 years old, tiny sensor, like low resolution, but I knew what I wanted to do with it, and I just worked around its limitations, and I got some really good photos of those baby owls, which, if I had left and tried to go home and get my camera, they probably would have been gone by the time I got back. So it's all about what you can use with, or what you have and how you can use it.
Evan, do you have a favorite type of photography?
Yeah, actually, so I probably should have mentioned that back in the last couple of slides, but landscape photography is definitely my go-to, especially nightscapes. I dabble in other stuff like street and portraits, but I'm really more into the landscapes, especially since I got into this stuff with my work trips, going to national parks and trying to take in as many different views as I could. So now we're going to move on and start talking a little bit about actually taking the photos. So what's the first thing that you're going to think about once you have your camera and you're where you want to take a photo? It's, how am I going to compose this photo? So compositions usually are made up of a foreground, a middle ground, and a background. So here's an example of pretty famous location. I think everybody knows that's the Golden Gate Bridge. That would be the middle ground here. But I wanted to add a little bit more interest. So I went down to this beach near the Golden Gate Bridge, and I got these rocks with the waves crashing over them. So that kind of serves as a foreground with a little bit more interest going on there. And then the background in this case would really just be the fog of San Francisco. But In other cases, maybe you get to this spot at sunset and this is a really awesome like blood red sky or something like that. So that would be your background in this case. Another good tip here would be most cameras allow you to add grid lines on the back of the screen that you're looking at when you're composing a photo, and that really helps you to figure out how to balance these elements. So you can kind of figure out, all right, how much of my foreground do I want to include here, and how do I put it all together using these grid lines. Next thing we're going to talk about would be the rule of thirds. This is kind of like a fundamental of how to compose a photo. So what you want to do, again, using those grid lines, you kind of divide your photo up into 3 rows and 3 columns. And where those rows and columns intersect, these intersection points, that's kind of scientifically been proven that that's where the eye tends to linger when you first look at a photo. So if you can position the subject or some kind of interesting element at those intersection points, then it's going to make for a much more compelling photo. So in this case here, I tried to get the Milky Way and this barn at some of the intersection points here, and that way your eye will naturally move across the photo and take it all in more.
Where was this photo taken?
This is Jenny Farm in Vermont. It's like a really classic spot in the fall. It's got some awesome views for foliage, but I hadn't seen anybody take any Milky Way shots there, and it's far away from cities, so I figured I'd give it a shot. So
It's beautiful.
did it last summer. 3 a.m. out there by myself. It's a little creepy, but it's worth it. Here's another example of the rule of thirds here. So you can kind of take a look at this shot without the grid lines. And then, when you lay them on here, you can see that there's the person here is at an intersection point. And I tried to put the TD Garden and the Zakum Bridge as some other points of interest. And this is actually this is a good example of the next thing I'm going to talk about too, which would be leading lines. So there's a lot of lines in this photo, and it helps to move your eye all around the image. And that would be the concept of leading lines. So if you can use lines naturally in your image to get the viewer to kind of take it all in and see what you're seeing, that's a really good strategy to compose a photo. So this is another night shot I took, Milky Way. I spent a lot of time looking for a road that would line up so I could do this. And you get the vanishing point here, right in the middle of the frame. And the road creates these lines naturally that lead right to the vanishing point. And that's where it meets the Milky Way, which kind of adds another line to the image. Here's just another example of using leading lines. This is just the guardrail and the railing to this other bridge kind of create this flow of lines from left to right and from the bottom of the image across to the top right. So that kind of naturally brings your eye through the scene here. And you can see that the person is positioned at one of these intersection points. So it just kind of creates a more balanced image, and it's easier to take in the whole scene and just kind of makes it a little bit more compelling.
I think something else that's important to mention is sometimes I don't even look for the leading lines or the rule of thirds. Your eye just naturally goes to taking a picture like that. So don't stress about trying to line everything up perfectly, because most of the time your gut's just gonna look right to you, and then when you analyze it, you're like, oh, that's why it looks so good, because you just naturally just gravitate towards that.
That's a great point. I'm not going to go ahead and say that I stood here like Ansel Adams on my tripod and arranged everybody perfectly in this image here, or all the elements. This was actually, like Ashley said, kind of a natural occurrence. When I was standing there shooting this is the way that it just looked the best, and it happens to be an example that kind of illustrates all these different strategies. So that's a good point.
I think also just again with experience, you just start to know what looks good and you kind of develop your vision and your style.
Yeah, definitely. The more that you shoot, and also the more that you look at other photos that you think are good. Maybe you find an account on Instagram that you think is awesome, and you start mimicking some of those strategies or elements. It kind of helps you combine those strategies and improve your own photos.
Yeah, and just to quickly go back, I think everybody loves your Milky Way shots. I don't know if you can go back to that picture. We have two questions about that.
Sure.
Is what time do you get up? I know you said 3 a.m., but like, how do you know what time to go out and like the weather conditions? And also, how do you position your camera? Like, what is your shutter speed? How long do you keep it open? Like, I think people are really interested in the tech, like how you did this.
Okay, I wasn't sure if people would be interested in the technical stuff, so I tried to like leave some of that stuff out. But in terms of planning these shots, that's kind of a spoiler alert for some future slides. But it is like part of the fun, I would say, for planning these Milky Way shots is you can do a lot of this stuff just laying in bed on your phone, flying around Google Earth or Google Street View, figuring out where you want to be, like what's a good location, where is it going to be dark, what's the weather like here. And there are apps that let you predict or visualize the position of the Milky Way because the night sky moves as, you know, from the beginning of dusk until dawn. The sky is a totally different position. So you can kind of figure out down to like the minute how to create a shot like this. So that's like one of my favorite parts of landscape photography is the planning aspect. And I'm going to talk about planning. But for this one, I was in Nevada on a work trip. I had checked into the hotel. I knew it was really dark out there. So I started looking around for places I could go and figuring out what time the Milky Way would line up. And this was probably around midnight in, I want to say June. So that's just kind of what the sky looked like out there. But in the early spring, when the Milky Way is just starting to be visible, you have to get up at like 3 to 4 a.m. to see it. And then by the time September rolls around, it kind of sets real low and you can't see it after 9 or 10 p.m. So it's all about the time of day or the time of year. And there's a lot of different factors that go into it. I could do a whole presentation just about Milky Way shots, but I don't think people necessarily want to see that right now.
I think we need to bring you in for an astronomy class too.
Yeah, you become like a de facto astronomer just so that you can take photos like this. So
Could you also talk about your shutter speed? Because I know it's a huge part of like trying to take.
oh yes.
Eye.
So all of my Milky Way stuff I shoot on a tripod. Obviously, you need the camera to stay perfectly still because you need to keep the shutter open for, I would say, at least 10 seconds. You can go up to 30, but there's a whole science depending on what lens you're using. You're going to start to see some of that movement of the sky if you go too long. But then you can also create really abstract, cool images called like star trails. You leave your shutter open for an hour or two, and it creates these swirls of the stars through the sky. So those are pretty awesome shots. So there's a lot you can do, but if you want to take a night shot, you should start at like 20-second shutter speed, put your aperture to as low of a number as it'll go, and put your ISO to as high of a number as it'll go. And that's a good starting spot. All right, let's keep going here. The next thing we're going to talk about is light. So we just talked a lot about photos taken in the dark, but what about lighting? So the best time of day to shoot, I think everybody's probably heard the term golden hour. That's probably the best way to control your lighting in a natural way is just what time of day you're going to shoot. So golden hour is the hour after sunrise or before sunset. And this is when the sun is getting low. The light is just a lot warmer. It's not harsh and completely overhead. It's just a lot more flattering for portraits. It creates a lot more warm tones for landscapes. It creates a lot more contrast and interesting shadows in street photography. It's just like the best time to go out and shoot. So that would be my recommendation for if you're just trying to use natural light. Here's an example of, again, the Golden Gate Bridge. This is actually the same morning I took that other shot. This is just like from the other side of the bridge, right when the sun started peeking up over the horizon. You can see it creates the shadow from the natural landscape. So it's just like a great time to be out, even if it does mean setting a 4 a.m. alarm sometimes. It can be worth it. In terms of positioning your subject with the lighting, this is kind of more related to portraits, I would say, but you got some different options here. So front lighting, this would be when you are standing between your light source and your subject. So your subject is facing the light. In this case, it creates a nice balanced look. It's very even. You can capture all the detail. In landscapes, this is also a good option because you won't get really deep shadows, which can be tough to get details out of. For something like a mountain shot, if you go early in the morning when the light is hitting the side of the mountain, it looks great. If you go late at night when the sun is setting behind the mountain, that would be a perfect example of backlighting, and it becomes a lot more difficult to shoot that mountain because the light behind it is just overpowering. So that's a trickier form of lighting, would be this backlighting. But if you know how to use it, you can take some interesting photos, or you can, achieve different looks like a silhouette look that can be really compelling. If you want to try using HDR mode on your camera, that can also be a really good way of handling backlighting because it helps. It actually, the camera takes a few different photos and uses some algorithms to blend them together so you can get the most detail in the dark spots while also keeping your lighting looking more natural. And then we got side lighting. This would be when your light source is kind of off to the side, adjacent to both you and the subject. This is some type of big cat at the Stone Zoo, leopard maybe. I took a photo of him on, some day I was at the zoo and the lighting was coming in from the side, and I think it creates a little bit more of a dramatic look in this case. I think that can be a good option for portraits, but it's also great for street photography if you want to get those, the contrast and the deep shadows with the nice light spots.
I think another great thing about lighting is you can always manipulate it. Like maybe not so much when you're outside, but if you're like, say you're in a house, like you can manipulate where you place your subject and what kind of front, like if you want front or back or side lighting. And like I don't know if people like the ring lights that people use like on TikTok all the time, like people use those because they want that front lighting that Evan was talking about. Like you can always manipulate your light if you have like lights like I have backlighting, which is terrible right now. Like it just affects how your subject looks in a really awesome way.
Yeah, that's a great point. We were talking about that before we started the actual Zoom when we were, getting all of our spaces ready. And I spent like 10 minutes trying to figure out how to light this office. And I was like, if I get this wrong, this is going to be embarrassing. Another way to manipulate light, which I have kind of mixed feelings about, would be flash. So a lot of people use flash or have it turned on or enabled on their phones. I think a lot of people might not know exactly when to use it though. So the idea of flash is to illuminate stuff within a certain distance of your camera. So if you're trying to take a photo of something that's too far away and it's dark, the flash isn't going to help you. This would be like at a concert. If you're in like the mosh pit or something and you put flash on your phone, you're only going to illuminate the heads of all the people in front of you, not the stage. So you just don't really want to bother in that case. But it's something you can play around with for other situations like a sunset where there's a really strong bright light source like that backlighting I was talking about. Your flash can kind of illuminate your subject and also not overpower the sun. So you can kind of actually balance your frame that way. You wouldn't maybe think to use flash during a sunset, but it is kind of a little cheat code that might work for you. I got an example kind of showing that. Oops. So I use flash sometimes when I'm taking Milky Way shots because you can light up a foreground that you really wouldn't otherwise be able to capture any detail in. So here's how I used it up in Sugar Hill, New Hampshire during the lupine season. I went up there, I figured out where I want my camera to be, where I want the position of the background, which would be the Milky Way, and the middle ground, which would be this church. And then I took a second shot with the flash on. You can see it's kind of hitting some of these less visually interesting looking parts of the plant. So I kind of reset up closer to these flowers. I adjusted the angle of the flash, and then I took another shot. So this is just one image that I took in camera using a flash, and it's just like a non-traditional way of using that, but it kind of shows the fundamental sort of design of what flash does. So now we're at the planning stuff that we kind of touched on earlier. Planning for me is like a huge part of photography. I think it makes a lot of sense for landscape photography because there's a lot of stuff that you can do in advance, whether it's scouting a location, looking at what the weather is going to be like, looking at the position of the sun or the moon. Yesterday was the super moon, so I'm sure you've seen some photos of the super moon put in some different, like, you know, Boston skyline or some lighthouses or something. People like me spend hours flying around Google looking for like just the right angle. Where can I go where this is going to look cool? That's all stuff to consider planning. And then, you know, it could be cloudy. You can't control that, but you can kind of try to go where you think you have the best odds. Some other stuff that goes into planning might be time of day, different angles for lighting. And also, if you're doing portraits, I would say you can plan for how you want to set up poses. It's not something that I typically do, but if I am going to take portraits, I try to figure out, you know, what are some poses that I want this person to do? And I think it makes it easier for the person having their picture taken if they know, all right, I can try to emulate this. So this is an example of a photo I took of my friend, and it was inspired by a pretty famous cover of a National Geographic magazine. It's a woman with like incredible eyes, and she's covering most of her face with some type of scarf. So I showed my friend, I was like, let's try to do something like this. So I think that really helps. And that's kind of a form of planning.
Yeah, and I think especially for portraits, a lot of models, or if they're not, if they're inexperienced, they might be like a little uncomfortable. So having a plan of like poses that they can do can help like ease them into what you're doing. And like if you're leading them, they feel a little more comfortable. And then that's when you can get, they'll be more comfortable and want to do different things. But in the beginning, I think it's really good to have at least a few poses planned.
Yeah, I think that social skills are like one of the most underrated parts of portrait photographers. It's like a lot of it is getting the person to just be totally at ease. And that's like, you know, having pre-discussed poses and locations and stuff goes a long way towards that. This is another photo that I did a lot of planning for. My dad and I went to Iceland a couple of years ago. And, you know, people ask me, like, how do you take these aurora borealis shots? I'm like, well, you kind of have to get lucky, but you can really put yourself in a position to get lucky. You know, half of the battle is being in the right spot at the right time. So, you know, we looked at cabins that were off in this peninsula, a couple hours away from Reykjavik. We got a cabin. That was the one that was in the previous photo in the beginning. And then you just kind of check the weather forecasts. There's different space weather forecasts you can look at, see like if the aurora is going to be higher potential. And then you just make the 5-minute drive down the street to this church, and, you know, there it is. And I gotta say, if you're going to Colby Farm this September for the sunflowers, you can definitely plan for that too. So I took this shot with my drone, and I went at sunrise because I don't love flying my drone when there's like a big crowd or anything. I figured, you know, we would have all the space we wanted, can kind of spread out in the sunflower fields. You get that good lighting with the golden hour. You don't have to battle for parking and stuff. And then when you're done, you can just go to Newburyport, get a bagel at Abraham's, and like watch everybody else try to take the same photo like crowding around like the same 10 sunflowers. So that would be my advice. If you're going on vacation or to like a popular destination or something, try to figure out what time might work best, whether it's timing for lighting or to avoid crowds. Like the Grand Canyon's going to look better at sunset and sunrise, but sunrise is probably going to have fewer people because they don't want to get out of bed. So if you really want that Grand Canyon shot, you got to set that early alarm. So now we're at the point where we have some photos, but we got to edit them. And as much as I don't like to admit it, because I don't love the editing part of the process, it's actually like really important. You can take a pretty mundane looking photo and just from tweaking it and making adjustments, it can really turn into something totally different. So what I'm going to do here is I recorded some videos of just going through editing a photo. This is actually from my phone using Adobe Lightroom, but you can do this on your iPhone or Instagram. There's, all these different applications that let you make these same basic adjustments. So I'm just going to talk about what those are and why you might want to use them. All right, so the first one usually on the top of the list would be exposure. And this is really just how bright or dark is your image. This can be really helpful if you maybe accidentally had a setting wrong on your camera and then you put your memory card in your computer, you look at your photos and you're like, they're all a little too dark. You can bump them up with the exposure, you can brighten them up, but you can see as I slide back and forth here, how much detail is actually captured in this image. Like you can see the sky here is pretty blue, but in its normal exposed setting, it's like completely white. So there's a lot of information in this image. You just got to use editing to bring out what you want to see. The next really important thing I would say is contrast. So this is usually like the next item down on the adjustments list. And contrast is just going to make your bright parts brighter and your dark areas darker. So you don't really want to go overboard in terms of sliding this too far in one direction or the other. But you can see as you go back and forth, I don't know if it's going to play repeat. Yeah, here we go. So as you increase the contrast, you can see that the foliage colors become more pronounced, and as you decrease it, they get more muted. So increasing contrast is actually a good way of adding a little bit more color and more pop to your image. But sometimes it can come at the expense of putting your subject in too dark of a shadow. So you don't really want to go overboard. But if you do go overboard, you can adjust the highlights and the shadows. So you can kind of tweak those bright parts of your image and the dark parts of your image separately. So you can adjust the shadows to kind of be a little bit brighter and bring out more of that detail in the subject, or you can dial back the highlights and try to reduce some of that washout in the sky. So those are pretty important elements of editing as well. Color balance is another huge one. I think this is probably the trickiest one because it has the highest potential to make your image look unnatural, clearly. You slide it a little too far in either direction and it looks like you're on a different planet. You can adjust the temperature, which is usually just blue to yellow, kind of warm to cool tones. And then there's tint, which is the complementary color scale. So you got green to purple, and you can kind of work those two in conjunction to make maybe a foliage shot look a little bit more orangey or warmer. Or if you're at the beach, you might want to accentuate the water and make things a little bit more cool. You can also adjust the saturation and the vibrance, which is really just going to be how intense those colors come through. So you don't really want to go overboard with that either, because it can start to look unnatural if you just slide everything to 100. It's not the best choice, but you can add a little bit more color just to make things like, in this case, the foliage, make it pop a little bit more. I also want to add, usually you don't have to mess around with the color balance too much if you're using your camera's auto white balance. The software has become so good, it does a pretty good job of getting things right just in auto mode. So unless there's some reason, you really don't need to do too much work with this. The next thing would be, I guess it's a series of things. It would be effects. So there's different adjustments you can make to things like clarity or texture or haze. This is all just different terms depending on what editing software you're using. But a lot of it is focused on changing the details and the contrast in very specific parts of your image. So you can see if you reduce the texture, it starts to look really blurred, or you can increase the texture and you can get details in those trees and the rock in the foreground. You can get that much more clear. Haze is kind of like an overall contrast adjustment. Not every program has all the same effects, so it kind of depends on what you're using to edit your photos, but there's no real rule here. It's just kind of use what you think looks good. I mean, that's kind of the rule with editing in general. As long as, in my opinion, if you're making it still look pretty natural, then you're not doing anything wrong.
Yeah, I think editing is actually one of my favorite parts of photography because you can completely change the way a photo looks through editing, and it's a way to embrace your own unique style. So, like me personally, I like my pictures to be a little brighter and like have more color, while other people's like a more dull look. And either way is a great way as long as you're embracing your style. So you really just have a lot of leeway with your editing, and you can maybe want it more natural, but like for more creative pictures, maybe you want it to be a little unnatural and a little different, and that's totally up to you. And I think that's why editing's definitely my favorite part.
Yeah, and I think it's also really easy because it's all just like playing around with different settings until you think it looks good. So, and it's also super easy because like Visco and Instagram actually have great editing things that I use when I can't get into Lightroom. So that's like a recommendation is Visco is great for that.
Yeah, you guys make great points. And also your style kind of depends on what you want to shoot too. So for you guys, it's really important maybe with portraits to have a totally different look than what I'm going for with landscapes. So there's no real rule. It's kind of develop what looks good to you. And if you have a business like you guys do, then that really just goes even further towards setting you guys apart and creating a portfolio and a comprehensive look to all your images that people can rely on it when they hire you for a shoot. They know what they're going to get.
Yeah, I think a funny thing about Ashley and I is both our tastes are really different. So we take the same picture and edit them completely differently. They look like two separate pictures. But they both look good. So it's really fun to play with.
And also clients sometimes want different things than what you like my style might not be what my client wants, so it's like you have to like play with that line and see like sometimes you have to edit things the way that you might not want but your client wants, and both are right, and there's no like wrong way to edit. It's just whatever you prefer and what your eyes like attracted to.
Definitely. So yeah, this is just a little before and after to just show, the original shot I started with, and then this is what you can do with it with editing. Just make it totally transform it into something different. So I wouldn't post this original form on Instagram, but maybe I would for this one. Actually, I did. So this is when I got engaged with my fiance. So
I think that's a class note in Journey magazine there, Evan.
yeah, could be.
You've got the photo.
True. Another aspect of editing, this is something that you can do pretty easily on your iPhone. And I think most people probably have, is cropping. So this is kind of an underrated tool in editing because you can really transform the way that an image looks to a viewer, depending on what you decide to include or exclude and what aspect ratio you want to display it in. So if you're putting it on your phone, like an app like Instagram, you might want to crop it to be more vertical because it's gonna stand out in people's timelines better. But if you're trying to print something for somebody, usually wall art looks a little bit better with the horizontal aspect ratio. So, it's kind of like a situational thing, how you're going to crop it for how you're going to use it. And everything that we just talked about with all those adjustments, you can do all that like right on your iPhone and probably on your Android, but I've never had an Android, so I can't really speak to that for sure. But Apple has all these different, exposure, highlights, shadows, contrasts. They even have some of the effects like definition. You can adjust the warmth and saturation, everything right in your phone. So you don't need to subscribe to some expensive photo editing software or, buy anything specific. You can do it right with what you already have. Maybe it's a little intimidating, but you can play around with it, and there's a button to just, revert to original. So if you feel like you go overboard or something, or you just ruin the photo, you just start over, or you just go back to what you had.
I think that's one of the wonderful things about photography too. It's so forgiving. You can make all of these adjustments and then go back to the original so that you don't lose what you started with.
Yeah, I think that's partly why I don't love editing either, because every time I look at a photo, I feel like I could have done it differently. And then I end up doing it differently and spending another 2 hours creating a totally different look. And it's like, I'm never done with this photo. So
That is something I struggle with a lot, especially looking at past photos, because your style is going to change as you get older and learn new things, and just like it'll change. So you'll look back at pictures and be like, that is the worst edit I've ever done. And it's just like, it's a tough battle.
yeah, but you still have that original image file. So you can go back and be like, you know what? With 3 years of experience looking at this, I can actually make this look way better. So thank God I took it 3 years ago. So there's also some shortcuts with editing, and I know a lot of people probably use them or have heard of them or actually are way more well-versed with filters and presets than I am. I know most photo apps like Instagram, and you guys mentioned Visco, they have built-in filters and presets, and those can be actually really awesome to use just to save time, or if you do feel intimidated trying to create some of these looks on your own. You can use a preset to just get yourself to a starting point and then tweak it from there. Or you can just kind of stick with something that looks good. You can scroll through pretty much endless libraries of filters or presets. I use them a lot for black and white photos, just because there's a lot of sort of fine detail stuff that you can adjust that you wouldn't necessarily think about in a black and white photo. And scrolling through the presets, you really see how they can all be different. So this is just like a little video scrolling through all the different options. You can see you click into different ones, kind of creates a very different look, even though they're all technically just black and white images.
I think a great way if you're just beginning to like take pictures and edit is using presets, because it's a lot less stressful, because you can go with the preset, and like if you don't like something about the preset, you can just go in and physically change it. And if you do like parts of it, you can keep it and you don't have to wonder how they got there. So I think it's a great way to start out. It's also a great thing if you're like taking pictures in bulk. Like Alyssa and I have a bad habit of taking way too many pictures when we do senior pictures, and we'll end up with like 1,000 pictures of one person, and it's really overwhelming to edit 1,000 pictures differently. So a preset comes in handy when that happens.
Absolutely. I've gone into doing some time lapses lately too, and that's like along the same lines of bulk. I'll set up my camera and shoot like 700 shots of the night sky, and I have to edit. If I edit one, I have to do them all the same way. So I just create a preset, apply it to the whole stack, and then I can create my little 10-second video. Let's see. So these presets, they're not just, again, on Adobe Lightroom or in Instagram if you don't have Instagram or Visco. There's a whole bunch built right into iPhones as well. So they're right there waiting to be used. So don't be afraid to scroll through all the different little buttons in your photo app. The last slide I have here is basically negating everything I've already told you. So nothing that we talked about is like a hard and fast rule. You can feel free to bend all these different techniques and ideas to however you want to use them. The point is, photography is a form of art, so there's really no wrong way to do it. If you feel like there's a better way to express yourself or create an image that you think is compelling, then you should go for it. You know, you don't have to do everything by the rule of thirds or have some leading lines or backlight your subject or whatever you want to talk about. So it's just like some examples of kind of me playing around with my camera and trying different stuff. This is adjusting the shutter speed to match half of the light cycle of a lighthouse. So it kind of creates this weird natural lighting that divides the frame in half. This is a great example of using planning actually, because I figured out when the supermoon was going to rise and how can I get to a point where I can work it into my landscape in a weird way. So this kind of looks like the moon is sitting right on top of this lighthouse. So it's just, let's get creative with it.
Were you
This
out
is
for
another.
last night's supermoon?
No, I've been lazy lately. Been not super motivated to go out and drive around. I just moved, so got a lot of house stuff to work on, but you know, can't wait to get out for some night sky shots. Yeah, this is just more of a creative way to use flash. Like I said, it lights up everything within a certain distance of you. So my flash wasn't going to reach the barn, but it did reach all the snowflakes that were falling in front of me. So it kind of naturally creates this look of, you know, how can I convey this really snowy scene? Oh, my flash will help. So it's just a different way to think about some of these things and put your own spin on it. And that's pretty much all I have. So if anybody has questions about anything, happy to talk in more detail about something, or if you want to get technical with some shots or go back and look at anything that we've already seen here.
We had one earlier on when you mentioned the owls. One of our guests was wondering if you happen to have any of the baby owl photos that you took with the point and shoot.
I don't on this presentation.
How about in your Instagram potentially?
Yeah, there should be one in my Instagram. So it's just my name, basically, Evan_Guarino. So there's definitely, it's been posted there. This was a couple of years ago now. You might have to scroll back a little bit, but you can also feel free to message me and I can send you that photo if you're interested. It was pretty cute. It was like 3 baby owls perched together, like looking at me as I was looking at them. They were a little suspicious, but I kept my distance.
We also had another question about your drone. What kind of drone is it?
I have the DJI Mavic Pro, which is not the most pro model you can get now. This is like 5 years old. It's great because it's really small. You can fold it down to about the size of a 16-ounce Coke bottle. But there's been several new iterations of it that have much better built-in camera stuff. I haven't upgraded because, like I said, with the gear stuff, you know, it can become a very expensive hobby to keep up with the latest things that keep getting released. So what I've figured out is how I can use my old drone to sort of take the best photos I can. I take bracketed images and then I blend them into HDR images. So that way I can kind of create more contrast if I need it, and I don't need to spend an extra $1,500 on the new camera and the latest drone.
I think something else, like even if your camera isn't as new, lighting makes the whole game. You can have the best camera, and if your lighting's bad, the picture is not going to come out good. So you can even make like your phone camera look amazing if you just light something correctly. So that's something else to think about. It's not how much it costs, it's just how good everything else is too. And I'm sure like a more expensive camera would capture that better, but
yeah. it becomes tempting to, like, if you know how to use the less expensive camera, like, oh, imagine what I could do with the more expensive camera. It's always so tempting to like upgrade to the latest thing. But, once you get that, there's always going to be a new model coming down the road. So,
There's another question about the software that you're using for the presentation. What is the software?
it's this really sophisticated program called PowerPoint. So, yeah, I put everything into a PowerPoint and I used one of the like preset designs to make it look fancier than it is, but kind of added some animations and stuff like that to create a little bit of a flow here.
Another question from someone watching is, could you recommend any photography resources or classes for kids?
Um, I can't really because I'm not a parent and I wasn't into photography as a kid, but I would say there are cameras that aren't that expensive. Like there's like a couple Polaroids and Kodak instant cameras. I think that would really help for kids. They don't have the longest attention span or necessarily want to look at their photos like on a computer or whatever. I think it's more interesting for them if they can take something and then instantly see the results. So, and it's not very expensive investment. You can buy one of these cheaper, like let me scroll back, way back in presentation. I think it was in the gear section. That instant camera would probably be great for kids because it looks pretty indestructible. You can probably toss it on the back seat and it won't get scratched up or anything. And if it does, it's only $60. And they can go out in the yard and take pictures of the flowers in the spring or something and have the Polaroid and be proud of it. Like, look, I took a picture of something. I'm a real photographer.
I think another great resource, like Evan said earlier, is YouTube. Like that's really how I learned a lot of things. And I think YouTube can be engaging. Like there's certain people, if you just look up like photography 101. I know Masterclass has some great resources too. I know you have to pay for that. But that's like an app you can download and they have great presentations on everything but photography too. So that would be another resource you can use.
And YouTube is free, so it's really good.
Exactly.
Yeah, YouTube's a great idea. There's probably a bunch of videos of how to explain photography specifically for kids or have some exercises built in for them to practice. So that would definitely be the first place I would look is Google it.
And I would recommend too, locally, a lot of our recreation departments within our towns have resources and offer, one day programs during, say April vacation, or even the local high schools oftentimes will run programs like that. In particular, speaking from as a mom, during vacations for kids. So that's a nice way to get started. But the Polaroid Insta is what my own one of my own children is using right now, and they love that because it's that instant gratification, but they can go mess around as much as they want.
Every year we usually have like a film camp. I know Alyssa can talk more about this because she actually attended it, but it's not just film. You can really just do whatever you want. So if you have kids and they happen to go to Austin, or even if they don't, I know Alyssa's brother did it too. They can go and it's just an awesome experience.
Yeah, the film program at Austin's really awesome. APS Media, if your kids go to our students at Austin, APS Media is really awesome. And we have great equipment. So, yeah.
Yeah. Another question that they're coming in, is about if you have any recommendations for learning HDR.
It depends on. So it's all like basically computational photography at that point. You got to find a program that's going to blend things together. Most of the photography specific programs like Lightroom and Photoshop have that built in. So you just select which images you want to blend and just tell it to do HDR. The key is kind of how you take the photos. So you need to take 3 basically identical photos with different settings so that you achieve a different exposure level on each one. Um, I think a lot of cameras have a semi-auto mode for this. Whether it's your phone, you can enable HDR on your iPhone. You can shoot in HDR mode in a lot of DSLRs now. It'll just do the 3 images automatically and then blend them in the camera and give you a JPEG output. So that could be a good option, kind of introduce the concept of it. If you're really trying to figure out what it's all about, you can see the difference between if I just shoot this in auto mode regular or in auto HDR, like what am I really getting from that? Like when are the best times to use it? So that's where I would start.
Another question we have is about the flash and if you recommend using it on water and if it helps show that, or if you have any other suggestions on how to take better pictures in the water.
So water, I can't say I've ever really used flash around water. I haven't found myself needing to, but it can reflect light. So I think it can be maybe a little dangerous. Might end up reflecting that flash back and just ending up too bright. One thing I will say for taking water shots, if you have like a DSLR or something that you can put physical filters onto your lens, you should use a polarizing filter because that cuts the natural light at a certain wavelength so that you can adjust it, you can reduce the glare on stuff. It's kind of incredible. I use that on my drone too. You really notice the difference when you can eliminate glare. It helps you shoot in like the middle of the day if you can't really get out at golden hour or whatever you're shooting you have to do under full sun. You can get rid of some of that ugly glare, which often is coming off of water. So that would be a good choice for that, I would say.
Another question is someone just got a new Canon camera and they're wondering what settings would be good for night photos.
So for night photos, also welcome to Team Canon. That's the only brand I've ever shot. So I would say the first thing you want to do is switch your camera into manual mode because your camera's not going to like shooting in the dark in auto. You need to tell it that there is something here to see, even though it's pitch black. So you want to set your mode to manual and then adjust your shutter speed, which I think in Canon is denoted by the letter T. So you're going to want to put that at like 10 to 20 seconds just to play around with it. And then your aperture, you want that to go to as small of a number as you can. That means that the lens is open as wide as it can be, and it's letting in all the light that it can. So where you're shooting at night, there's not a lot of natural light. You're getting whatever's coming off of the stars or the moon or whatever ambient light's available. So you really need to get all of it in there as you can. So those are the key places to start would be shutter speed in the 10 to 20 range and aperture just as low as you can get it.
There's also a question about if you have any recommendations for amateur photography sites or like groups that people could join.
I actually have a lot of friends I've made just from being on Instagram. They host meetups depending on if you find the right groups. Like locally here, IG Boston and IGers Boston before COVID, they used to do meetups where you just go out and basically plan to meet at, say, the public gardens or something, or seaport, and you just walk around. There's no real goal. It's just kind of be with like-minded people taking photos in the same area. A lot of times I didn't even take photos. I just kind of hung out with people and talked about stuff. Maybe dabble, take a few shots here and there or whatever, but it's really more about like a networking thing. So that's kind of how I've met a lot of local photographers. I think that's kind of the best part of Instagram to me is like the actual social part of social media, not getting caught up in why doesn't my photo have 200 likes or 2,000 likes or whatever. It's, actually commenting on people's work and meeting up with them and learning from people or teaching somebody else something new.
Another question is if you could provide a recommendation on where someone could get photographs developed other than CVS or Walgreens.
I get my photos developed for film. Sometimes I shoot film. I bring them to Hunts, which is they have a few locations all around this area. Their headquarters is in Melrose. They have a Boston and Cambridge location, which are pretty convenient too. They do all of their film developing, whether it's color or black and white, and they can make prints for you. So if you're looking to get something as a gift, maybe print a nice 16 by 20, have it framed, that they can offer all that stuff. And I found that they're pretty competitive with pricing, and you get to go in and talk to them about what you want instead of trying to hope that Walmart gets it right through the online order.
I think another great thing about hunts is if you're like a beginner, they have a bunch of equipment and gear that is discounted because it's been used before, but it's honestly just like brand new and you can get it at a huge discount. They also are great for like renting things. So if you're going somewhere and want a really nice lens for just the day, but you don't want to buy one, they're a great resource for that too.
Yeah, Hunts is awesome. That's a good point. They do classes as well, so that might be another resource to look into for anyone who's interested in that. I don't know if they have anything specifically for children, but they have some pretty specific classes, whether you want to learn editing for portraits or a specific type of shooting. They might meet up at a certain location and take long exposures of the ocean or something. So they have a lot of different classes going on. You should check out their calendar.
This next question is actually for Ashley and Alyssa. You're in the final days here at Austin Prep as seniors. So are you going to continue your senior photo business when you move on to college?
We're not sure.
Silence was the
Still thinking about it, right?
We'll both be in different cities.
yeah. Alyssa's leaving us and going to NYU, which is just the worst. So we'll see. I definitely personally want to continue photography just for myself. I think it's a great hobby to have. It's fun. It's gets you outside. It's just I think it's awesome, and taking pictures of other people is awesome too. So we'll
Mhm.
see.
Yeah, film has always been my focus, but I think photography is just such a fun thing. Like Ashley and I have so much fun doing it with friends, like who we're taking senior pictures for. It's just so much fun. I don't know how I'll be able to do that in college, but I would hope to. So,
So you just got to think about it like your business just opened a new location in New York.
exactly.
We have another question, which I'll let Alyssa ask here, and then we have a last, I think, and probably our final question of the evening that I'll check in with.
So do you have any tips on how to take pictures of animals where they're not blurry?
So this is tough. I have a ferret and it's pretty much impossible to take a photo of. It's like always moving. So the best thing to do is try to get your shutter speed as fast as you can get it without the image being too dark, if that's an option. I know that some cameras like point and shoots have a pet mode. That's basically what the camera is doing. If you set it to pet mode, it might have a little animal icon on it or something. You could check your user manual and see if that's an option. But essentially you need the shutter speed to be really fast to capture that action. It's the same thing that wildlife and sports photographers are doing. So, you catch an image of like Tom Brady throwing a pass or somebody catching it, you want that crisp but not like blurred with their movement. So you got to use fast shutter speed there.
All right, and our last question. This one's fully loaded here. Evan, who was your favorite teacher at Austin Prep?
Oh no.
You can guess. This came from a classmate, I believe.
This is too tough. I loved them
You could
all.
plead the fifth if needed.
Any teacher I had, they're all tied for first.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, I think that wraps things up for us this evening. And I want to thank Evan and Alyssa and Ashley. Thank you all so much for being here. I know I absolutely learned a lot, and I'm hoping that I can improve my own photography skills. And somebody was asking if we are going to make this presentation available online afterwards. So yes, we did record it, and I'm going to watch it over and over again because I was taking a few notes, but I'm going to need to watch it again so I know what I need to do. But I also want to invite all of you in our audience and our presenters here to join us in May, on May 25th at 7 o'clock. We have our next Austin Prep Presents program, which is finding Veritas, Unitas, and Caritas in the game of golf. And it's with golf pro, PGA pro Bob Baldessari from the class of 1980. And he will be hosted by our own Director of Athletics and Summer Programs, Pat Driscoll, who is also an alum from the class of 97. And so we'll look forward to having them here. And this will be a really great family program about how to grow the game of golf amongst from your littlest ones all the way to your grandparents and all of that. So I hope everybody will join us on May 25th. And again, Ashley, Alyssa, Evan, thank you so much for being with us this evening. And we'll sign off now. So thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Thank you
Thanks.
guys.
Thank you.
Bye.